Hey, business builders. In today's episode, I'm joined by two powerful business builders, Xana Winans of Golden Proportions Marketing and Melissa Miller of TCB Promotions. Xana is about 10 years ahead of Melissa in a few ways. She's about 10 years ahead in age, and her business is about 10 years older. Also, Xana's business is about 10 employees ahead of Melissa's. Xana has a bit over 20, and Melissa has about 10 employees. And in this conversation, you're going to hear Xana's story of building her business and hear about the journey and hear about some of the good stuff and the rough stuff and how she's transcended that and how she's just stayed on the path. And you're going to hear Melissa share a bit of her story of startup and how she's gotten to this point. And then you're going to hear them dialogue, and you're going to hear almost this mentor-mentee relationship. You're going to get a front row seat as they talk about how to build business and emotional things that come and how Xana pushed through it and what's normal and what's, just all part of the journey, and can't wait to share this with you. Welcome to the Business Builder Way podcast, where we help business builders grow leadership skills and wisdom and stay grounded through hero stories. So let's get after it.
So Melissa, your question was?
My question was, I was able to learn some on socials and your website about your life. You told your story on your website about what happened when you started college and how you met your husband and how it all went from there. And I was just personally curious of what happened before that.
Interesting question. Nobody actually ever asked me about that part. So I feel like being a business owner and being in marketing has been in my blood since I was born. Even though I come from two artists, my father ended up in the world of marketing. He took art and kind of applied it to marketing, did video marketing for Westinghouse corporately. And so it's kind of always been part of my thing. And when I was a teenager, I joined the one of these kind of like business building groups for teenagers. And at the time they wanted you got together with a group of people and you had to form a small business and you competed against some of these other groups. And my group came up with the incredibly boring idea of they bought Swedish fish in bulk and they boxed them up, and the kids were to sell them in school and you were to make money from that, and they were going to grow the business from that. And I did that for all of about 2 days. And I said, this is stupid. Why am I selling products to make money for somebody else? I could do the exact same thing myself. So I quit that group like the next day. I took all the money I had saved from babysitting. I went down to the strip district in Pittsburgh, which is where you bought things in bulk. I bought cases of candy bars, knowing what my fellow students liked. I carried my books in my arms and packed my backpack with sugar, essentially, and sold it in the hallways and in the middle of class, and had teachers buying stuff for me. So I made a lot of money, and until the principal finally came down on me sometime in my senior year and said I was told that I was a distraction, which I was like, I'm sorry, it's your teachers who are buying stuff too. Don't just blame me. But that being an entrepreneur has essentially always been in my blood. I couldn't imagine any other way of doing it.
Thank you. That's a really cool story. And it's interesting because when I'm hearing your story, that wasn't what it was for me. Like what it was for me is quite the opposite. What was my upbringing was go out, get a job, work hard, and go to work every day. And that was kind of what was instilled in our family values. We were of a German, Irish, Italian background, and that was what we did. You go to work, you get paid, and that's, don't owe anybody any money, no debt, and that kind of thing. And then it was somewhere along the lines when I was working for someone for 10 years, doing what I do now, selling promotional advertising. And I was really good at it because it's gifting. It's gifting done right, and it's getting to know people, which is one of my favorite things to do. I feel like there are two stories, the one we tell people and then the one we tell people later. And so I was really good at getting to know the real people. And so this was like a great match, and I did really well for her, but it didn't take long before I saw how horrible she treated her team. And that just bothered me. And so that was my mission. My mission was to go on my own and just treat people with respect. And I continued to sell promotional advertising because I was good at it and it was what I knew and I like it. But I just knew that I had a dream of making people feel really good about themselves and the work they do when they come to work. So that was my pivot point, but kind of why I wanted to meet you. Well, I didn't know I wanted to meet you until Wayne helped me know I wanted to meet you. And now I didn't know who you were. I was talking about you, but you didn't have a name, right, Wayne? I knew I was like, I need someone because I knew how to use my grit and my grind and my street and my hustle to get the company from where it was to where it is today. But I know I have a lot to learn on how to go from where I am now to where I want to be. And I'm not sure that grit and grind is enough. I mean, certainly you need to still have that always, but I don't think it's enough to take it to the next level.
I don't know that for anybody it is. If you're not always learning from books, from coaches, advisors, industry groups, whatever, then you're missing out on opportunities to grow and get better. Grit and grind are the thing that drive you to find those advisors and coaches, in my mind, because you're stubborn enough that you realize you don't know it all on your own and you need some help. So I don't think you did anything wrong. You took the same journey the rest of us did.
Cool. Good to know. I didn't know. I don't know what I don't know.
All of us. I mean, that is the joy. I don't know how old you are. I'm creeping up on 54. And I remember at 30 thinking I knew everything, and then turning 40 and thinking how incredibly stupid I was at age 30 compared to what I knew by then, and kind of gave me that perspective ever after, that there's so much I don't know, and it's just a journey to keep learning.
I like that. Yeah, I'm 44, and I would say that it's in the past 5 years, or maybe 4, that I realized, okay, I grew it to this, and now I need process, now I need reporting, now like I need an employee manual, like I'm starting to realize, like, oh snap, like we need policies, there's more people, and I'm kind of like, uh-oh. So that's like, I had a staff member come to me and was like, I'm signing this paper, I was hired, it says no tattoos, but I have tattoos. And I was like, skip that page.
Those things constantly evolve. I always tell my team, every single thing that's in our employee manual is because one person screwed it up for everybody else. Like, you have to assume the best in people until somebody proves you wrong, and then it ends up in the employee manual. It sucks, but that's just,
like last Christmas, I realized I need to like ask people to ask for a vacation a certain time, because like 4 people took vacation in December, and I was like, they're like, what, we can't do that? And I was like, oh, next year you can't.
Yep.
So I get the feeling, Xana, as you were talking about growth, and it's constant and you learn and it's all a journey, that the entrepreneurship thing or the business building game is that like some of it is we tend to take it really seriously, and it is serious. You get people's paychecks and things, but I also sensed a little bit of levity in how you were saying that, like enjoying the journey and learning and reading and meeting coaches and other business owners is just part of the fun and what you do in life.
Yes, those are the highs that combat the lows. I mean, any business owner, you need those things once you've hit a low point, because you realize that you don't know the thing that you need to know to advance. But I think the levity in it comes from, I've had this agency over 22 years now. And like, I remember the days where, back when we were all in person, an employee would come into your office, knock on the door unexpected, and they come in and they close the door, and you're like, oh crap, because you just know something's coming, either a difficult conversation or they're leaving. Now, doesn't faze me. Like, but you need those years of experience to see the things that happen for what they are, as and be able to look back at them with perspective and not see things as quite so dramatic anymore as they used to be years ago. Just because you survive them and you move forward and you realize nothing is inconquerable.
Yeah, I want to replay that over and over for my psyche.
Yeah, I just this morning I had a guy cancel an appointment because he said that he was working with Signature Bank, and it was March 13th, and I don't know what'll happen from now forward, right? So he said, well, Signature Bank failed and I have to go find another lender. I'm like, wait, I thought it was Silicon Valley Bank that failed.
Two of them.
I guess I missed that. So then I looked this morning, I'm like, oh, Signature. Oh, I see. And I can remember how I felt in the past, and hopefully this doesn't, lead into, knock on wood, like as rough of a period. But I also, today when I read it, I was like, oh, but when you're 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when people talk about recession or things, it hits you, it would have hit me in a different way. We're figuring out we have to adapt to whatever comes, which I'm no soothsayer, I don't know.
Well, you have to adapt. I mean, that's just life. If it were, there was a great quote that I heard once, and I wish I remember who it was from, but they said basically, like, in business, if you have 2 good days in a row, appreciate them because a bad day's coming. Like, you don't get a long period of everything going perfectly, because that's also just life. I think it's just more amplified when you're in business, especially as the business owner, because all of those troubles feel more personal when you're the owner, as opposed to, your employees just look to you to fix the problems. But they're all conquerable. You get through them. So you appreciate the good days even more because you've seen enough of the bad days.
So I'm gonna kind of mix order a bit here, Melissa.
Yeah.
Melissa, you are in the way this conversation set up, and Xana, perfect, is 10 years farther along the journey of life than you are in terms of age, but also has had the business for how many years, Xana?
22.
22, and how many years, Melissa?
That's a complicated question, but I'll just say about 10.
About 10. So in both, okay, good. So both cases in round numbers, 10, 12 years ahead. And so we're going to work on getting you farther along the journey, Melissa, and seeing what you can learn from Xana. But we're also going to share with listeners Xana's journey as well. So it's like a 2-for-1 here. And it'll be more than 1 + 1 = 2. It'll probably be 1 + 1 = 10 or something in terms of value. So Melissa, though, how are things now at your company? Because you've been talking about the journey and where you're at and what you need to learn next, but how are things now, which I think may inform how Xana tells her story about her beginning. So just describe people and office and state of the business.
Sure. So the reason I said it was a complicated question about 10 years is because I've been working the company for 12 years, the past 6 years out of my home by design. It could have been bigger, but I wanted to take care of my small children who are now grown a little older, 12 and 9 versus babies.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 years ago, I got an office. I rent a space in the Poconos, and we have several suites. And it started from 1 to 2 to 3, and now we're up to 10 employees. And I have 4 salespeople, some support for those salespeople for marketing and administration, some accounting, some production, and an executive assistant. And business is doing well. Each year we're profitable. We had an enormous increase in sales last year, like upwards of about 30% increase. And that was because one of our main clients was bought by the Hyatt, and that put a lot of money into the company. And that's kind of what I was hoping for. You keep grinding and working hard and shaking hands and meeting people, and then you just hit this tipping point where hopefully money starts to come in a little bit faster. So where I am now is kind of the staff wants more in terms of where can we go from here. So they say that's something I'm facing. Some of the people that have been with me want to move up. And
Mhm.
my organization is only a certain size, so that's something I'm thinking about a lot. The other thing is, where I am now is what do I do with the money I do have? And I'm kind of like, okay, so I got to this nearly $2.5 million in sales. And typically we lived around 2 million, 1.5 million. Is this growth going to continue? How do we make decisions on what to do? How do you help it continue? So now I'm in this new phase and just trying to make these decisions. And I'll say, Wayne wrote something to me and you yesterday that, how do I enjoy it too? Like, so I don't often enjoy it. And that doesn't mean I'm going around like a crazy lady, like sad and miserable. But in the back of my mind, it's always lingering, nagging, like, don't fail, don't fail. And I grew up in poverty. So I have a bit of poverty mentality that I'm working its way out through legitimately exercising it out, like really just pushing through and like not letting those voices have too much authority over me. And I would say, like you said something interesting, that you were always an entrepreneur. And I told you this, and now it might be more clear. I wasn't. In fact, quite the contrary. I was told quite different by my upbringing was go get a job, work for someone.
Mhm.
So I'm battling these internal voices and fear factor, but also to end on a positive, like I feel really good about what I've accomplished here and what we're doing. And I really love the people and I love what we do, right? I feel good about promotional products done right. I feel good about the message of rid the world of landfill fillers, tchotchkes, and swag with no purpose. Don't do it right or don't bother. And I'm really excited about the future. But I've learned through Wayne, I'm both. I'm excited, I'm happy, I'm proud, I'm nervous, I can't sleep sometimes, and sometimes I never ever think I'll ever fly first class because it's too expensive. There, that's my story.
There's a whole lot in there to unpack.
I know.
So let me address the enjoy the ride thing first. I think it might be innate to the type of personality we are that we don't just stop and enjoy it because we're drivers and go-getters and never satisfied with. I don't know about you. For me, I am the kind of person, and it can drive my staff crazy. I always see room for improvement, where no matter what it is we're doing, there's always something we could do it just a little bit better. And so I'm never satisfied just sitting exactly where we are. So it is hard to enjoy the ride. One thing that helped me enjoy it a little bit more, frankly, was just time, was learning the business side of the business. I mean, it was easy for me to do the marketing for other people. Nobody ever sat down and taught me, here's how you run a business. Here's how you set your budgets and what your target numbers should be for your adjusted gross income and what percentage goes to payroll and what kind of benefits to offer without being taken advantage of, and like all of these things. So through a variety of things over the years, I eventually learned, mostly through coaches, honestly, I learned the business side of my own business. And it was probably not until 2015 that I had loans that I'd taken out, everything paid off, and every year could start taking money home for me. And I will tell you, I have always believed, for me, money is a safety thing, is not a for fun thing. And I a one income family. My mom stayed at home. My dad worked. We didn't have a ton of extra money. We lived a decent life, but nobody was crazy. And so I kind of always had that mentality too, is that I need to make sure my bills are paid. I have an obligation to my employees to make sure that, I pay them so they pay their mortgage. But there was a point in time once I learned business that I finally was making profit, and that profit grew every year. And once I had enough of that profit, like I think the first year I really took home a decent profit, my son and I took 2 weeks in Italy, which is one of the best trips I've ever done, which felt so crazy indulgent at the time and now is no big deal. And then I would take all that extra money and I completely funded their college accounts, 100%. so that by the time, and it wasn't even until my daughter was halfway through college that we were done funding it, because my kids are smart and picked good schools. I was able to buy cars and cash for my family. Our mortgage got fully paid off. And it wasn't until like those obligations were fulfilled that I finally gave myself the freedom to say, oh, those pair of boots cost $300? No problem. They're good quality boots. I'm not buying cheap boots anymore. Or I want to buy whatever it is I wanted, whether it was, I still don't take enough time off, but feeling like I don't have that incredible financial pressure to be beholden to everybody else. It takes a long time to hit that point to finally feel good. So it's coming if you manage your business properly, but it's not overnight. I don't know about you. That's me. I wouldn't give myself a break until I felt like I had those obligations taken care of.
Yeah, I hear that. It's helpful to hear what you're saying. Because I think I've been hearing it with Wayne and the others. Like, I liked how simple you made it, Wayne, in the email. You're like, chill out. Right? Like, I just have to chill out. But it's good to hear, in a sense, it's coming in time, because you're right. I liked your story when you said if someone comes in the office and closes the door, you used to get nervous, or however you phrase it, and now you don't. I'm finding that too. Like, if X happens, I'm not feeling what I used to feel anymore. It's coming.
Right.
I just think I've always learned to learn from others. That has been learning from others who have been there before and have done it right and with similar values. So I just want to make sure I'm asking the right questions, but it sounds like there's no fast lane.
I wish there were. I mean, I swear to God, I remember when I was in college telling my parents I was going to be a millionaire when I was 25 years old. I was that driven. What a crock. It's just, life doesn't work that way. Unless you have that millionaire idea that, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or whatever, the vast majority of people just grind it out until they hit that point of, I've finally done enough that I kind of feel like I'm on top of the mountain a little bit, and you can look back and enjoy how you got there. But it just comes with time.
So that's a good place to go into. Melissa and the other business builders that I work with, maybe at some point I'll coach somebody who has a Zuckerberg idea and or we could really look at that and say, how much is it luck and timing? And it doesn't matter. But I tend to work with a lot of people like you, Xana, who have put the work in and taken the time and learned. And the 12, it's by my math, roughly 12 years, 14 years or so into it is when you started to get that feeling of like, all right, like I can be calm in the storm and I'm okay. Because you did the work, and it wasn't linear, and it was that whole, there's these pictures on the internet of the entrepreneurial journey and how it goes up and down and sideways and through the swamp and alligators and then on a mountain thinking you got it figured out. You've done that.
Oh yeah.
So can you go back to what we talked about before college? So I know enough about your story of starting Golden Proportions Marketing, doing marketing for dentists, that your husband Larry I was or is a dentist, no longer actively dentaling, but you went in there and had a child and started. So can you go back and tell the story a bit of the journey?
Sure. The agency story, or even prior to that?
Well, when did you first start doing marketing? When did you do marketing for dentists? What was your entry point? So
I started doing marketing for dentists basically shortly after I married my husband, because so I met him when he was in his first year of dental school. We got married, graduated. He took an associateship out in this small rural town of Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. And we move out here, and like all associateships, literally almost every associateship, it dies after like a year and a half. And we're faced with, do we move back home to Pittsburgh, be closer to family, or do we start something from scratch? So he was kind of the first entrepreneur in practice within our family. And he decided he wanted to stay where we were. We liked the area. So building his business, I had to do marketing for dentists because I knew marketing. I worked for other agencies. I would have been it was just to my own family's benefit to actually do marketing for him. So marketed for his practice. It started getting picked up and noticed by other dentists. And I opened my agency on the advice of a consultant who apparently my husband had fed some information to and said, would you please tell this woman to open her own agency? She won't listen to me. So I had to hear it from third party, because your spouse always should support you, and it's hard to see them as telling you something objectively. So that was 2001. And I started with a laptop and a 2-line phone in a spare room in my husband's dental practice. And by 5 months later, I had 4 employees, and I just hit a lot of lucky points is what it feels like. Like the growth of my agency, I want to give credit to people that have nothing to do with the fact that I actually worked hard for this, but you almost feel like it was gifted to you just by the situation that I was in. I was asked to lecture at this group out in Las Vegas that taught cosmetic dentistry to dentists around the country. And they liked the work that I was doing for him and for a couple of other dentists. They asked me to create a national campaign that would market cosmetic dentistry on a national scale. We had ads on Extreme Makeover and in Oprah magazine and, big national stuff. And I, honest to God, I felt like it got handed to me. Like I didn't earn that opportunity in the first place. I still feel that way to an extent, even though I go, okay, I've had over 2,000 dentists trust me. I must have some idea of what I'm doing. But I think every entrepreneur has a little bit of that imposter syndrome of like, I just got lucky. I probably wouldn't have gotten here if it weren't for a half dozen other people handing me opportunities or trusting me when they had no business trusting me. So sorry, that is a really roundabout version of the question I think you asked, but that was how it started. And I think more than anything, when somebody called, I just took the business, whether I felt qualified to do it or not. And I sort of learned as I went along. But I think every business owner does that, don't they?
I know, yeah. I can speak for myself, yes. Figure that out. You need me to wrap an ambulance? Yep, I'll do that.
Yeah. I have always said I feel like I learn on the backs of my clients, and I feel guilty about that sometimes. Like I've made mistakes that were only because I'd never done that thing before, but because I was willing to take on that test, and it was a challenge, and sure, I'm going to find a way to figure that out. But at the same time, it makes you stronger for the next client who wants you to do that thing. Did that answer your question, Wayne, or am I off?
Sure, it's a good
tangent.
No, that's great for how it started. And then what are some other, if you think about, you are journeying along, you're climbing a mountain, and there's going to be certain resting spots. You don't rest for very long, but it's like the trail goes and you're like, okay, now we got to this checkpoint, and then we climb and we get to this checkpoint. What are some of the checkpoints along the way from there to where you're at now? What are some of the phases or stages of building the business?
So every checkpoint is because of some big failure that happens. My team knows I preach fail forward. It is okay to fail as long as we learn from the failure. So every checkpoint came from something serious that happened, like how I treat my team. And the fact that I started to put some structure in how I managed my team and give them the ability to grow and gave them KPIs to be responsible for, came from losing a couple of good employees because I wasn't doing those things. Or the financial management of the agency came from the checkpoint of the recession, which could have destroyed me and got awfully close to at least mentally destroying me, but like it forced me to learn the lessons of how to have good, solid financial management in place because you didn't have money to spare. And so I guess my checkpoints were, gosh, I don't know. There's the employee checkpoint, there's the financial, there's the results checkpoint. That was a big one for me when I had clients start to really question if our results were there or not, it forced me to get into a whole new level of reporting and create software that proved accountability and return on investment for what we created. I don't know that there's like a recognizable point or spot, but it was any big shift that we've had was because of a recognition that I wasn't doing something right. And those were painful, but very necessary. So nobody likes them, but boy, they are helpful.
And what is Golden Proportions look like now? You're remote. You don't have that office, that brick and mortar anymore due to transitions during the COVID years. But what is it like now? Employees are scattered. They're communicating electronically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's 22 of us at the moment. We got bigger, but I actually scaled back because I recognized it was vanity numbers of number of employees, but I needed profitability more. We are fully remote around the country. We used to have all local employees because we were brick and mortar, but the recession hit and I have employees in Texas and California and Michigan and Alabama and New Hampshire and more places than I can remember. All of those changes are good. Everything is electronic communication, so it's Slack and Zoom. While everybody says that gives you more productivity, there is definitely a flip side to that, which you have to work a lot harder to maintain connection with your team because you can't have barbecues on the back deck and, Easter egg hunts in the office like we used to do. So you have to create other ways of creating connection with the team. Financially, where we are now, it's funny that you ask this because I felt like we've been stuck at this 3 million AGI number for a couple of years, like we can't get over it. And I joined this group of other agency owners. It's like a big national group, but there's kind of a small mastermind. And apparently the 1 million, 3 million, and 10 million AGI mark is where people get stuck. And there's something that happens right around the size of that organization that you have to make a whole nother shift to employee management, financial management, marketing and sales systems. So like all the things that you thought you've been doing right before suddenly aren't right anymore for you to get to that next level. So we're actually just about to make those shifts.
Man, it never stops, huh?
No, what worked or what got you there won't get you here, basically, or vice versa, whatever that was. But yeah, no, it's never ending. Do you feel like you've gotten stuck some places along the way?
Yeah, and I really admire, I really resonates to me what you said, like a lot of what you've learned were in those moments, the examples that you gave. And I guess hearing that, I wondered, is that still what's happening now? So you may have lost an employee, you said, or some of the things you mentioned and how you grew and how you developed. Is that still happening? Like, is it still how you're growing, or was it how you grew from B to C, but not how you grow from C to D?
No, it's those exact same things repeat, but with a different set of criteria. So I went through a wave of losing employees in the past year, but most of the people that I lost were my local employees because I had leveled up to being able to recruit talent from across the country. And it was much better talent than what I had here, which meant I was no longer, what had been okay before was no longer okay. And they were not comfortable with what I was asking them to do in terms of leveling up. So like those, you're going to repeat the same. I mean, we all have money, product, quality, people. Those are primarily the big things. And you're just going to keep learning those lessons at whatever that next level is. So be prepared to make those mistakes several times.
Yep.
They're just, that's your standards for what is okay will grow.
Need to change. And I think something about me and probably many others, it's like, I think I could pretty much handle anything. It's great to like have like this crystal ball, and that's kind of melodramatic there, but to hear someone at your level say these things, it kind of gives me this sense of like, okay, I'm okay. And validity, like, because the voices that tell us you're not good enough, or this is wrong, or people are not, like, they kind of get too loud sometimes if you allow them to. So you have to replace those with voices like yours. And so hearing you say some of the things I'm saying, like you leveled up to get better talent, like that has happened to me once. It happened, the pandemic hit and no one needed promotional products done right or anything. And so we laid a lot of people off except my one key person who was just amazing. And then when we rehired, we leveled up. And the people that I hired then, I couldn't bring them back because we weren't that company anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And that the recession or the pandemic for you was the equivalent of my going through the recession back in 2008, because your business, basically the bottom dropped out, right?
Yeah, 100%.
The same thing happened for me. Nobody's going to spend money in marketing when, you know, they're barely hanging on to the business that they have. But you learn from it, and you learn how to become more not immune to that, but be less impacted by it the next time that hits, because there'll be a next time. There's always going to be a recession every roughly 8 to 10 years. There'll be some equivalent of that'll hit again. So it's lots of hills and valleys.
Xana, one thing that I know that you were working on that was a resistant spot or a tough spot, as we talk about leveling up and hiring more people, but that you don't do Easter egg hunts, etc. Maybe there'll be a phase of Easter egg hunts for Melissa on the journey. So Melissa, you've told me that you'd like to be like Fezziwig in A Christmas Carol and spread cheer and happiness with your employees. Xana has been Fezziwig at times. So this is no ordinary Easter egg hunt that they would have around the office. It was an Easter egg hunt that included significant cash prizes in certain eggs. And they had the barbecues on the deck and cocktails, or, selectively and carefully at certain times. And it was a kind of a party place in this brick and mortar, including noisemakers if there was something to celebrate. And Xana, maybe you want to talk about that, but what I had on my mind was, I know you went through a little bit of a mourning MOUR, right? A sad phase to have lost some of that. But it sounds like you've gotten through mostly you may still wish you had a little bit of that back, but it sounds like you've created culture in a different way.
I had to, but when you transition to Zoom, like every minute of my life is scheduled in, if I want to see somebody, it has to be pre-scheduled that we have a face-to-face meeting like this. And so that was really hard for me. I preferred to have people pop in my office, or I, grab conversation with them while we're making lunch or doing something social. I loved that connection. That was like a huge thing for me with my team the entire time. That it was one of the reasons I built my agency the way that I did. But after, it was probably 2 solid years of the pandemic, and I'll be honest, I resented the fact that we went to all remote. My team essentially forced it on me. That wasn't the business I wanted to create. That wasn't the business I had built. And when the recession hit and it became the Great Resignation. You felt like you had to give them what they wanted, otherwise you were going to lose your team entirely. So that's kind of when I agreed to go all remote. And it cost us in terms of culture for a while. But about a year ago, I said, I had even put other people like on my leadership team in charge of culture, and they just didn't get what I was trying to get them to do. They would send out swag to employees, send them coffee mugs or t-shirts. And I'm like, that's not culture. That's branded stuff, which is important, but it is not the people coming together. So we started, I said every Wednesday, 12:30 to 1, we're all going to get on Zoom together and we're going to do something stupid. And we now do remote scavenger hunts, or we talk about what are you watching, or we'll do trivia contests, or there's a different theme each week so that we create that interactivity. It just has to be scheduled now differently than where it used to be a little more organic in the past. But it comes back around. It's just a new way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well done.
Yeah, really well done.
And plus I do pony up for 2 in-person retreats a year, which when you're flying people in from all over the country, not on the cheap side, but I feel like it's absolutely critical, because if you look at the studies that say why employees stay, which kind of going back to this thing where you said your team's looking for they're looking for growth opportunities, they're looking for better benefits, all of those things plus actually feeling connected to their coworkers are the reason that good people stay. So you have to get them in person, or at least I know I do, a couple of times a year, so that they have some memories with the people that they hang out with online these days, that they actually see the person behind a Slack message, if that makes sense. They really, really need that. People are going to stay not just based on how much money you pay them or how much they earn, but because they like the place where they work.
One of your very similar situations, Xana, you have a position that would be, I'm not sure what you're calling it right now, dental marketing strategist or account manager. And you've got somebody who's been with you, it's Jen, been with you for a long time and has grown and keeps a big book of business. And then Melissa, you've got people that are managing these accounts. So you've gone out and gotten some of these bigger accounts. You've been the hunter up until now, Melissa, but now they work with that account to see when they're having a corporate meeting or when they need to do some gifting, and your account manager stays with them and helps them with these new projects that come in. And that way, there's some similarity between your 2 businesses with that position that really is a generator of results, revenue, etc. Right? And Xana, you have found ways to keep that position growing and expanding. Not always, but in the case of that person, you sure have. Questions do you have, Melissa?
Sure. I guess I'm looking at my list of questions and trying to pick appropriately. I would say, in regards to compensations, how did you learn what the right compensation was? Like, I'm finding like everybody here tells each other what they make. So I'm finding compensation in general, comparing, if I want to use a real simple word, maybe a little jealousy or that kind of thing. And I do what she does, why don't I make what she makes? That's kind of happening. Like, how do you handle that? How have you handled that?
Totally went through that. And I used to dole out raises according to both longevity with the organization and how I feel you're contributing to the company, sort of merit-driven raises. And I still give those to an extent, but when you got 3 or 4 people doing the same type of job, they do talk. And of course, God bless the internet and Glassdoor and PayScale and salary.com, they can all look up and they think they know what they ought to be making. So we hit a point, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago. My COO, Lori, now every year she does a salary survey where we have the title of the position, the responsibilities of the position, and then she goes and she looks at all of those Glassdoor and salary and pay scale, and she says, you can put in parameters that say, based on the size of the organization in terms of revenue, the number of employees that you have, here's what somebody with this many years of experience would make in this role. Here's what somebody with this many years of experience, and they give you kind of a range. And so we have a whole spreadsheet that says, if you're an account executive with 1 to 3 years of experience, you can make between X and X. When you hit 4 to 6 years, you can make between X and X. And so that allows us, if someone asks, to be totally transparent and say, you've got 2 years of experience, this person has 4 years of experience, they're making more because they've moved up in the scale. And they can look that same information up online. But we give them, I mean, it's not just the dollars they take home. One thing I learned with benefits is I heard this analogy of many years ago that the car manufacturers, they already know the next 20 years worth of add-ons that they're going to start putting into cars. You never used to have cup holders in a car. You never used to have automatic windows. You never used to have a sunroof. All those were options. And now they've become standard. Same thing with benefits. You can map out all of the wonderful benefits there are to give. And every year you give just one more thing and they feel like you're giving them something big. And it lets you stair step it so it's not so overwhelming.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways that you can add on little things. So those things help keep them engaged as well. And then the last thing that I will give you from a compensation standpoint, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we started doing something called performance incentives, where we would say, this was a big leap for me, but I had a lot of behaviors I wanted to change in the agency. So we looked at each individual person and gave them very specific targets that we wanted them to reach, whether it was a sales target or amount of billable time or, a particular project they had to complete or certification. We said 5% of your salary, and you're going to, you'll earn it by hitting these particular targets. Not everybody earned it 100% of the time. That helped them get additional compensation that they worked hard for. The problem is, at a certain point, it became entitlement. Mm-hmm. And that just burned me. The entitlement mentality just ate me alive. I literally remember crying with my coach about how hurt I was at how entitled my team was. And there was zero gratitude for all the things that I had given them. And so I took away the performance incentives about 1.5 years ago, and we moved to a profit sharing program. And the profit sharing is based on budget, plus we have to hit X% profit before anybody's even eligible. And then it's kind of staged out. And so now I finally have, instead of somebody working for themselves and their performance incentive, the whole agency has to work together to accomplish the goals that get us to the profit sharing.
I need to have your brain. Thank you.
I want to point out, from listening and watching and having heard this with lots of other business owners, that too is all part of the journey. And sometimes what works for a while, then we tend to think we have to keep doing it. And what you just demonstrated is that that's not true. You can make a change. You can change a pay plan. You just have to clearly communicate to people why you're doing it, what's happening next. They have a place to go, and then you make a change. My prediction is there'll be something about your profit sharing plan. I hate to say this, right? That'll come up. That'll be like, uh-oh, and then you'll change again.
Yeah. Right now it's pretty much based on just hitting certain target numbers in terms of sales, but I can start working in things like the work has to get completed within X time period, or we have to have a certain percentage of client retention. So you can keep adapting those programs to hit your next goal. But you're right. I think one of the big things I learned from you, Wayne, is you just tell them, here's your compensation plan now. It is subject to change in the future. And as long as you tell them that, they might not love the change, but when it's coming, they're like, okay, I know it's coming. And they grumble about it for a couple of months, and then they get used to it and they're fine. And the ones that don't are not people you want to stay anyway.
Right. You got another one? That was good.
I don't know, another one, what?
Oh, no, Melissa, we have
Oh, another question.
time for say 2 more ish.
Okay, so when your staff is working in teams, have you experienced them? I'm trying to think of the word to say this. Have you experienced the teams maybe having some struggles working in that dynamic? Like, so you have a support person that's working, you're laughing, with a senior person, and then they start to feel like maybe the hierarchy's not there. So teams, collaboration, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, they're humans. There's just personalities that don't jive. I've had literal like screaming matches in the office, to the point that I have taken some of my very best people and had to write them up because it was so unprofessional. They just butt heads. And so you change teams or you change people.
Did that get better when you went virtual? Do you feel like in person makes it harder?
It did get a little bit, it got better when we went virtual, but there's a lot of it is also still personalities. I am a high driving personality. You cannot put me with an account manager, because I still do some selling. You can't put me with an account manager that is very thoughtful and takes 10 minutes to say one point that I would say in about 5 seconds. Like, I will throttle that person. But he might be a perfect match for somebody else on my team who needs that level of support. So sometimes there's a little personality profiling you have to do to juggle people together. However, there's also something to be said for, I know when you've only got 10 people, there's only so much juggling you can do. But you can, as the boss, say, here are my expectations for how you're going to conduct yourself in this role, and then hold them accountable to it. And if they don't consistently, you got to get rid of that person. And I tell you what, when you get rid of them, everybody's like, well, it took you long enough.
Okay. And then I guess my last question is, as just a little backstory. So I was growing the business, as Wayne said, originally getting clients, bringing on, as I got more clients, brought on a partner, a director of sales. And the role is to help manage the sales support and to go and get other clients. So just setting a little bit of a stage for you there. And now I'm pivoting and I'm starting to have some sales reporting that I'm doing, starting to look at pipelines. And I'm absolutely, like we both said earlier, you take a job, you don't really know how to do it, but you do it and you make it happen. So I'm kind of in this world of sales now and trying to encourage people besides me to do the hunting. And I'm like, I'm struggling to motivate or struggling to know that I'm doing the right thing because I don't have the training to train a sales team. So that's my example, sales teams and training. But how do you pivot to doing things that isn't marketing? Like, how did you learn to do benefit packages? And how did you learn to, like, the Wednesday part? Like, how are you learning all the things you're learning?
Coaches and other people who do what I do. So I could not tell you how to do sales. I've just naturally always done it. It's just part of who I am, which is funny because I never thought of myself as a salesperson. I was a writer and a marketer, strategist, not a salesperson. And yet it's natural for me. Couldn't teach a soul how to do it. Hired Wayne. Wayne built a sales system and process and taught my team and taught my VP of sales and marketing, is her role now, taught her how to be a sales manager. Things like the benefits and all those questions. I joined this mastermind group. It's from agency owners across the country. And there's like 15 of us in this group. We get together twice a year, but you have this, like, we have our own Slack channel where we can ask each other questions. And there's people at all ranges of experience There's people with 5 people in the agency, and there's a guy who's doing 40 million and he's got 200 employees, and everybody and yet everybody still has something to contribute that helps the other person. So it is super valuable just to have other people who've been there, done that, to give you ideas. You still have to figure out what works for you, but that has been huge for me, because otherwise I'm just sort of like taking a stab in the dark.
So I'm happy to hear you say that, because I think that's what I'm doing.
Good. And that was not planted, by the way. That legitimately, that's what I'm currently doing. That Wayne was fantastic for teaching us a sales system and how to overcome objections and all that kind of stuff. And you're doing the right thing. I
think everything you've said is like just super duper validating. Like, oh, okay, I'm not totally screwing this up. I'm doing good.
You're learning the lessons that I think every business owner learns.
There's no shortcuts. It's just get around people that can teach you what they've done and get around people that need to learn from you. And I think a lot of what you said is just a lot of the things I'm doing. I think I just felt scared that I don't want to make a mistake that I can avoid. Now, I get mistakes are going to happen. I'm not naive. I understand that. But I just didn't want to make a stupid mistake, or like one that I could have learned had I read the fine print, right? You read the fine print, you're like, oh snap, it says 4 o'clock check-in. I didn't read that.
Right.
Like I don't want to make those kind of mistakes.
You're going to anyway. Sorry.
Xana, how do you
inevitable.
how do you look at financials, Xana? How do you look at your numbers? How has that evolved, and how do you make decisions as to whether you're going to invest in a new person or a new, I don't know, $30,000 software? How do you make significant forecasting, thinking ahead financial decisions based on numbers that you have now?
So that was a long, expensive lesson as well. I mean, I couldn't have told you how to read a P&L 15 years ago. I didn't even know what it was. But now what I do is, again, through enough experience, I know how to read a P&L, and we do budgeting every single year. I have significantly grown our recurring revenue because I live and die on recurring revenue. It's predictable income. Roughly 75% of our AGI every single month is on the books on the first of the month. Okay, repeat your question. I've sort of lost it. Like what numbers how do I know what numbers I need to track? So as I've learned that stuff, we put KPIs in place for everything. Probably too many in the beginning, and have narrowed them back. But I measure things like my profit margin, and we set a target for profit every month, and number of leads that I know I need to have that are going to funnel down to number of sales calls that are going to funnel down to number of contracts. I track production time. And there's a saying, you run the business by the numbers. And that's exactly right. You just have to figure out what numbers you want to improve, and you start tracking them, and by magic, they get better. It's easy, though, to want to improve literally everything. What you have to do is your annual planning, where you say, here's what I want to focus on this year. Now, what KPIs apply to those things that I want to improve, so that I can measure that and make improvements as we go throughout the year. And then the numbers that I'm doing great on, they happen by the fact that we finally figured that thing out. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. And what I hear is just like a lot of other things we've talked about in this interview is you got to do it. You got to be in it. You got to be working it. It's there's this myth that there's a some that other business owners, they just got this all down and they know exactly what they're doing. And there's some formula that you can find, and it's not. Like, you do the projections and then see how it works out, measure it monthly. I also know you've got Lori and other people on the team. It's not just you, but you're in it. You have to get in the numbers and feel it. I don't think there's a shortcut around that.
No, there isn't. And the numbers tell you if somebody's doing your job or doing their job or not. They're just, people cannot make excuses when the numbers aren't hit. Instead, their responsibility is to say, here's why we're not hitting it. I mean, we're big fans of traction, so we IDS everything. We identify what the problem is, we discuss it, and then we solve the problem. And you work it out, and you follow the steps to solve the problem, and the numbers tend to get better.
I
So
can talk to you forever.
you are welcome. You have my email. You're welcome to email me at any time. There's calendar links on there. Find time. Good luck finding time on my calendar, but when you can, I'm more than happy to talk to you. Been there, done that. I'd say it always gets better, but Wayne's right. It's like this. It gets better and then it gets worse, and which forces you to get better. But it's still a lot better than where you were 5 years ago and 5 years before that.
Perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you both. It's been really good to spend time with two very smart, driven people that are building something and creating and that are in it. And Melissa, yeah, I can see why you could talk with her forever. That's how it goes. Just like Xana, you're in that group and you're in Slack and you're asking questions. It's good to have people around us who are playing the same game. Right?
Mhm.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Well, I know you all have other meetings to go to, but thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Good to meet you.
You as well.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Business Builder Way podcast. If this episode spoke to you, click that subscribe button and share it with a friend. That's how this message gets out into the world. If it is helpful for us to have a short conversation, I'd love to do that. Send me an email at wayne@businessbuildercamp.com.